After the West African nations severed mining contracts with key Western countries, including France, and called for French and US troops to leave the country. And for more on Turkey's energy diplomacy in Africa, joining me now from Berlin is Thomas O'Donnell. He's an energy strategist and a global fellow at the Wilson Center. And from London, Michael Amoah. He is a visiting senior fellow at the London School of Economics and Political Science. Gentlemen, welcome to Straight Talk. It's good to have you on the program. So, Thomas, Turkey's foreign, defense and energy ministers, along with the country's top spy chief, Ibrahim Kalın, visited Niger a few days ago. What was the significance of this visit, and what do you make of this preliminary deal struck on energy cooperation between the two countries?
Well, thank you for having me again. Well, Turkey is very interested. Let me start from this. Turkey needs energy, and the more independently it can acquire the energy, the better geopolitically for Turkey, so as to diminish its dependence, especially on Russia, but on imported LNG and so forth. So it's been very active for some years in trying to develop its own capacities to go out into the Black Sea, into the Mediterranean, and now down near the Horn of Africa, off coast of Somalia, and also interested in Nigeria, to try and develop gas and oil and bring it back home or sell it on the market. This is very important for Turkey's energy security. And it also has, of course, other important security relationships in the African region. That's a correlated matter.
So, Michael, what do you make of the timing of this high-level visit and meeting, which came after Niger's leadership withdrew mining rights from Canadian and French companies to develop uranium deposits?
I think the timing is just procedural. I mean, the President Erdogan of Turkey invited the Prime Minister of Niger in February. So this is a reciprocal visit, to follow up on what was tentatively agreed when the Prime Minister of Niger went to Turkey. And of course, in the Prime Minister of Niger's visit to Turkey, they discussed things about energy, potential cooperation and all that. So the visit that happened in Niger was basically to make sure that what was tentatively agreed would be put in concrete. And obviously, it's quite a high-level visit because you had the foreign minister, the energy minister, the defense minister, as well as the spy chief. So there is a collaboration of things going on about perhaps drones, about uranium, and other defense mechanisms in this visit.
So, Thomas, is Turkey solely looking to tap on the country's vast mineral reserves or fill the vacuum of French influence in the country?
Well, I would say the two go hand in hand. This vacuum, of course, is a very big problem for Africa. I'm not saying that France should have a dominant position for a long period of time in Africa, but the point being that there's a sort of vacuum at the present time. Russia has been stepping into that vacuum, as you know, and this is not in Turkey's interests. It's also not in the interest of various other outside players. And so the way to get involved in a country is not just simply to get involved in the security arrangements, but to try and get involved in business. Now, this advantages Turkey, of course, if they can get involved in developing some of these minerals. That would be great. It's not so easy to develop this uranium, for example, that you were mentioning, but it's not impossible to do that. But I would say developing business arrangements hand in hand with the security arrangements makes for a more secure, trustworthy, and so forth relationship going forward.
So, Michael, how is the new leadership in Niger navigating its relations with the Western world? And at this point, where does Turkey stand?
Well, I would imagine that they are negotiating as strategically as possible. And the key thing to look out for is a win-win situation where Niger gains what it needs to have from these relationships. So, for example, Niger is looking to beef up its anti-terror measures, and perhaps maybe Turkey can supply drones and other defense, apparatus to assist with that. So, of course, in that exchange, if Turkey is also perhaps maybe looking for uranium or maybe other energy products, then there is a win-win situation. And that's the key thing which Niger is actually seeking to achieve in its current navigation of relationships with the West.
So, Thomas, just a day after the Niger agreement, Turkiye and Somalia signed a hydrocarbon exploration and production deal. This one just follows a maritime deal struck back in February between the two countries. So what should be expected from this deal? I mean, what does Turkey stand to gain?
Well, as I touched on earlier, Turkey, for a number of years now, has a very particular situation. It has a growing economy, therefore it needs energy. And it's trying very hard to find gas and oil as close as possible to its own borders and to be able to exploit it itself and bring it back home. I was explaining this to somebody the other day, and in a way I realized there's an analogy to China in the 1990s, much bigger economy. But when China realized it needed, for its growth, it needed these things, it went abroad, created companies that were capable of going abroad step by step. Now, in these early steps, Turkey and the minister, when he spoke about the visit to Somalia, he spoke, quite proud that now they're going to send Turkish ships that are going to do the 3D seismic offshore and be protected by the Turkish Navy. That's a step forward for Turkey to be able to do that kind of work itself. There's a lot more to go. It'll take a few years even to do the exploration before you can start talking about exploiting these offshore reserves.
So, Michael, how would Turkey's economic and defense cooperation with Somalia help this war-ravaged country develop, and what are the main challenges, you think?
Again, the key word here is a win-win situation. Somalia recently was feeling threatened by Ethiopia's attempt to have a naval base on the coast of next door Somaliland. So it was quite strategic for Somalia to actually strike a deal with Turkiye, whereby Turkiye would step in to protect Somalia's shores, as well as in return, perhaps maybe explore some oil and gas, interest over there. So the win-win, approach is actually working in this respect.
So, Thomas, how has Ankara's entry into Somalia in 2011, which started out as a humanitarian partnership, evolved into a strategic one? What did Turkey do differently than other major players?
Well, in some ways it did things differently, in some ways it didn't. There's a number of countries that have been very concerned for the security of Somalia. You have the African Union has been very directly involved. You have the UAE, you also have Qatar, and you have Turkey. And you had the United States and the European Union, and we could talk about that. Everybody has been backing down lately. And I think Ankara probably realized there's a dangerous situation. They could lose the influence they had in some way, because Al-Shabaab, like an American official said recently, all the gains against Al-Shabaab of the last 2 years have been rather suddenly lost. So I think if Turkey wants to preserve what you're talking about, what it has gained since 2011, in still a very unstable situation where Mogadishu has very low amount of control over anything in the country outside of its own area, Turkey has to, move fairly strongly to somehow help the government. The money is not going to come for a long time for these offshore developments, but when it does, that could help significantly. Right now, the problem in Somalia is that nobody is willing to put troops to do anything more than sort of, if they can, hold back Al-Shabaab or ISIS in the north. As far as going to governance building, even the European Union says they aren't going to go that far anymore. So I think Turkey has to move strongly right now to build relationships to preserve what they had, actually. They've had.
So, Michael, what do these latest cooperation agreements, both with Somalia and Niger, mean for Turkey's footprint in Africa?
Well, essentially, Turkey has been looking for opportunities to bolster its foreign policy image. So it's always been looking for the right opportunities to move in. And I think that some Western countries being kicked out has also served as an opportunity for Turkey to move in to also be able to make an impact. But of course, I mean, these African countries would also realize that Turkey is at the same time a NATO country, nevertheless, except it's a NATO country with a difference, attempting to also make sure that there are meaningful partnerships. And Africa is looking for meaningful partnerships with any other state around the world. Mm-hmm. So that's where the bargain is struck, and I think this time around, the regime's current government in Africa are actually striking very strategic deals with all partners around the world, particularly with regard to counterterrorism, defense, and energy, particularly also in the current global carbon transition, strategic minerals from Africa, as well as the wide range of defense equipment that Africa needs to counter the various terrorism and conflicts across the continent. So that's where it seems to be happening at the moment, that Turkey are looking for opportunities, Africa also seeking to galvanize on the instances available to make sure that it has what it needs also to get on with what it needs to do for its citizens.
All right, gentlemen, unfortunately, we'll have to leave it here. Thank you very much for joining me on Straight Talk.